What's going on, fellow hunters? Welcome back to Winter Wolf's Den. Winter Wolf here, going to be hunting down the prey solo tonight. In case you hadn't noticed, we missed this week's episode of The Last of Us on HBO MAX. We had some technical difficulties, prompted by Winter Wolf himself, where I boomered up my entire system and didn't realize the hard drive was full. So after King Z and I sat down and did this not once but twice, and it didn't record after I threw a hissy fit. We kind of tech supported the way to my stupidity, and here we are. Unfortunately, King Z can't come back for a third night, but I do have his half of the show that I'm going to clip in when we get to a couple of the points of that we wanted to discuss with you guys for this episode, and hopefully it comes across as seamless as I can get it. And we're looking forward to sharing this discussion. So we're up to episode 7 of The Last of Us. I'll give you a brief synopsis here. Yes, if you had watched last week and watched the after show credits from episode 6, you would have known this was another flashback episode for The Last of Us. This one is based entirely on the DLC content that came out for the original game called Left Behind, which this episode also shares the title from the OG game. And in short, really, it gives you a whole big, long, in-depth look into Ellie's backstory, how she grew up in, the Fedra Military Academy, and, when she was eventually bitten, some of the friends and challenges that she had along the way. It moved pretty good as an episode here. Plot-wise, it really is her journey, to kind of find herself, to kind of face her romantic feelings that she had for her roommate / best friend, Riley. And kind of the fallout of what happens when Riley makes some decisions and leaves Fedra to join the Fireflies, how they kind of reunite, have like one last great night out before Riley's supposed to leave for an assignment outside of Boston. She's going her separate ways and has come back after running away for a little bit to give Ellie like the best birthday night out ever. So the first half of the episode really is the two girls kind of just doing teenage girl stuff. They sneak out of the academy, they come across a bottle of booze, they share a jump scare or two along the way. Everything's great. They have a little bit of banter back and forth about the similarities and the differences, really, if you get down in the nitty gritty of how Fedra and the Fireflies really are more similar than they are different, and that they both result in some brutal means to get what they want done. So it was an interesting kind of juxtaposition. It was kind of superficial, but it needed to be stated that way people could have a better understanding of the world. So I didn't begrudge them getting any of that stuff out there. That was fine. And then the second half is really where tonally the show comes more in line with the more horror aspects of what's going on. They're jumped by an infected, kind of ending their girls' night out, which until that point had been, all puppy dogs, unicorns, and rainbows. They had a little fun night out at a shopping mall that Riley had discovered wasn't really locked down and had restored power to it. And then kind of treated Ellie to a carousel ride, a trip through an arcade, which had some really cool nostalgia moments for me. It was cool to see that kind of stuff. But then, like I said, as it shifted gears, it shifted into the horror tone where they get jumped by an infected that they didn't see in a part of the mall. Both girls are, spoiler alert, both girls are bitten. And, because it's in the past, neither of them have any inkling that immunity is a possibility. So they kind of have to contend with their final closeout moments. And so that's kind of the synopsis there. It's two girls going to a mall, having fun, to a mostly 80s soundtrack, and then all hell breaks loose and bad things happen to good people. But before I get into kind of my feelings and my takes on the episode, and before I cut King Z's footage back in, just wanted to thank you guys for following us as we've gone through the show. We've loved following this one as much as we loved following Andor on our last meetup. We're pushing hard for 100 subs, so we hope you enjoy the videos enough along the way to maybe consider dropping a subscriber to your humbly low subscriber rated channel. We would definitely appreciate it, but we'd like to get the comments going a little bit more than we'd actually want the subs. We really want to talk about these kind of shows and kind of what makes them tick with anybody, amateur, professional, just armchair enthusiast, casual, whatever you consider yourself. If you like this kind of genre stuff, please comment, and we'll hitch up those comments and the replies as quickly and as frequently as we can. We would love to have the dialogue. So I think for me, the high point of the episode here was that they did a few creative things, and I think the first one for me is they hit the nail on the head with casting. for Riley. Storm Reed, very good as Riley, very likable. She's quick-witted. She has a good banter with Ellie, who at this point is a little bit more reserved, but also still sarcastic and has a little bit of bite to her. But Storm Reed's Riley balances it out really nicely and kind of neutralizes it in a way that makes Ellie a little bit more likable early on. She's really able to capture the range of emotions that you would have gone through in a situation like this. She hits the happy highs and the super sad lows when the bad things happen at the end. So it was fun watching them two work together as they kind of had their typical junior high school girl, quip back and forth. It was pretty good. I liked watching her work. It's a shame that because it's a flashback and a one-off, that'll be really all that we get out of her, for obvious reasons there. If you didn't follow the DLC or you haven't seen the episode yet, you'll figure it out as you go. So that was pretty good there. The second thing that really I enjoyed out of it, I'm going to let King Z explain it after I just kind of bring it up, is there was a definite shifting point, a focal moment in this episode that kind of breaks down where happy ended and bad times began. And it was subtle to the characters because they didn't know it was happening. It was mostly left to us as the audience. And it's the two girls are playing an arcade game. They're playing Mortal Kombat 2, one of my all-time favorites. It was cool to see that brought back on screen. I think that somebody had caught up with Ed Boon, one of the founders over there at NetherRealms, originally from Midway and creator of the original Mortal Kombat game, mentioned how it was cool to see MK2 in a flashback to the early 90s or whenever that was. Whenever the game came out in the early 90s, but their game was apparently still laying around when the pandemic happened in World. So I thought that was cool to see that in the show. But the shot I'm talking about is the girls are playing the arcade game, and it's set in this dilapidated ass mall, where there's graffiti everywhere, everything's grime covered, nasty looking. You don't want to be there. You wouldn't book your kid's birthday party at the mall, except for this one arcade place. Because it was clean, it was brightly lit all around. The fluorescent lights were on, the arcade sound machines were going. The music for all the games was pumping. It was cool. It was a happy place within the mall, right? And then, as I'm gonna let King Z explain, they have this one shot where, as the girls are playing, the camera kind of pulls back and out, and all the color and the light and the joy and like the music and the happiness and everything sticks with them in that little pocket of the mall. And then as they come back, they get back out into the main hallway of the mall and kind of shift over, and they end up in this really creepy ass toy store that looked like it might have been at home in Resident Evil or Silent Hill or I don't know, some 80s slasher mall movie or something like that. It was just awful looking. Broken toys. One of the toys I think was missing an eye. It looked like it had 8 inches of dust on everything. Nowhere you wanted to be. And of course, that's where the infected would be in this situation. You'd be in the dirtiest part of the mall, fused all nasty into the wall, how they're doing up the cordyceps effects with the prosthetics, the practical effects that make it all very sketchy, lifelike. If you didn't know any better, you'd be like, okay, that might be real. So I'll let King Z explain that part, because he's obviously my inside guy with all the tech babble for the what it's like to be boots on the ground and shooting these kind of things. King Z, I know you can't hear me, but explain it to the good people.
Yeah, it's the technical aspect. So how they probably did that shot, we call it a dolly shot. More than likely they use floor rails, which they come in different measurements of 8, 6, and 4 foot rails. Most common is 8 foot. You can link them all together, and then we put what we call skateboard wheels on, they look like skateboard, roller skates type wheels on these long cylinder things. And then we'll put a 4-way dolly on that. Now, either they might have a true dolly, which is like a Fisher. And that's the common one you see. Like, you'll see pictures like Director City on one. It has like a boom arm on it and camera on there and a guy sitting on it. There's also a couple other different types. There's one called a 4-way dolly where it's like a flat bed with just a handle and you can put a camera on it on like sticks. That's what we call tripod sticks. And that you could use that, or you could do a lot of fun stuff with doorway dolly. We put a jib on a dolly, pulling it, and did a jib dolly. And if you know what a jib is, that's where you put the camera on a long arm and it goes up and down. You can rotate the camera if it's a mechanical one. It can swing. But the shot in episode 6 when they were coming into Jackson, where it was looking down and then it started to rise and then you looked at them, that is a what did I say? Jib shot. There we go. But this one was a dolly shot, and they pulled it out, and I believe it was on rails because it was a straight pull. Usually when you're using a Fisher, unless you have a really good dolly grip, it's not going to be that straight unless it's on rails. So they pulled out real slow, and then when we got to the toy store, this was more than likely a Steadicam shot. A Steadicam is a body harness support arm camera mount, where a guy who has all this to help support the weight of the camera, and it gives you that kind of the camera floating look. And that's what I believe they did with this one. They probably flipped the camera upside down because it had that low shot to it, but more than likely it was a Steadicam shot. One of the things that we've actually done before in a movie, and it was really cool, we set up the tracks. We had a 4-way dolly on roller skates, and we started pulling it, and then the Steadicam operator, or we started pushing it actually. The Steadicam operator was sitting on it on an Applebots. Applebots is just a standard box that we use. I can put a picture up right here what an Applebots is. And then as we got to the end of the track, he stood up and started walking in motion at the same speed, and we recovered the tracks as he started walking around, because he started shooting the other side, so the tracks were gone. So you just see the ground on the other side. It was an awesome shot. It was actually on one of the first movies I worked on that they did this shot, and it's the opening sequence of the movie. So it was actually a really cool thing. So that's your technical aspect. They used the dolly on roller skates, on rails, and then a Steadicam shot to make this thing happen.
All right, thank you, King Z. I know you can't hear that either, but I'm still being polite, keep getting my manners on. So the other thing that I really enjoyed about this episode here, and I wasn't expecting to because I had kind of lamented this phenomenon earlier when they did it in episode 3, just the flashback in general. At first I was afraid that having another flashback, and this is before King Z even prompted me to know that this week's episode was a flashback. I'm concerned that we're spending too much time away from the main plot of the game and the two main characters, and not developing their relationship enough. And and for all the positive accolades that episode 3 got with the flashback to Bill and Frank, at the end of the day, for your opinion on that show, whether you object to the relationship subject matter, or if you're just a diehard of the game and you wanted more Joel and Ellie, for all the things they got right with that episode in terms of the performance and the production, at the end of the day, the flashback doesn't make any sense to the larger plot of the show, right? In that flashback, you could take out everything that happens between point A and B, which was Joel and Ellie going to Bill's house, and point B, Joel and Ellie ending up at Bill's house and taking his guns, his truck, and and making the battery with the components in the fridge. The Bill and Frank stuff in the middle, none of that mattered. If we excise that entire thing, none of that mattered to the main plot. It left our protagonists no better or no worse off at all for all the good stuff that it accomplished in terms of their little vignette in the middle. It added nothing to the larger plot. This episode 7, when it does its flashback, it tells a story that fills in nicely Ellie's developmental moments before she meets up with Joel, however many months or, it is later. We get to see her start off in a place where she's having some trouble after, Riley runs away from Fedric camp. She's getting in trouble with her commander, with the other girls in her unit. And the commander basically puts her on Front Street and is like, listen, you could be a dipshit and have nothing, or you could get on the officer track and have the best kind of life we have to offer around here. But you need to, pull your shit together and, exercise, maximize your potential and be who you can be, And we kind of see that here go down through the episode where she suffers through Riley's death in this episode, and it defines who she becomes later, and that the impact Riley's death and kind of her parting wisdom to her about, we have the time we have and that's it. And we need to cling to that and make good on that. Yes, we both have been bitten, whether it's 2 minutes or 2 months, let's stay together and just have the time we have and not give up and, take the easy way out and shoot ourselves, as they were, thinking of doing at one point in the episode. So we see the impact of those events on Ellie in real time, because the book ends to episode 7 when we start. It's immediately after Joel's wounded and falls off the horse at the end of episode 6. We come back to them, and Ellie's dragged her, as she did in the game, to like a secure house somewhere by the rail tracks. We see the bloody drag marks where she's gotten him into the garage and, you know, has him comfortable on the floor as best she can for like the crisis that they're in. And then it's bookended at the end of the episode by her resolving not to do as he asked, which was to leave and go back to Tommy. And at one point early in that setup bookend, you know, he kind of summons all his strength and pushes her away and says, you know, take the stuff, leave me, I'm done. Go back to Tommy and just like live your life. So after he does that, she gets this initial flash of panic where like she turns for the door and she almost has her hand on the doorknob, and then it jumps into the flashback. But when we come back from the flashback, she abandons the front door. She instead goes back into the house. She's looking for anything she can find to kind of help Joel, to help treat Joel's wound. She winds up stitching the wound closed, and, you know, we cut to black, and then we gotta wait till this week to see, you know, how far into the future we're gonna jump. So we get to see how her actions with Riley and kind of what they went through inform her later on. So this was a creative use of a flashback because it filled in those details. We got to see a miniature arc within the episode where when she gets in trouble with the commander of her unit and he kind of puts her on that decision-making path, we get to see her actually choose which path she wants to be by the end of the episode. So it kind of calls back to itself, and they follow through on that through line, which was interesting. So yes, you could remove this flashback episode. I guess you could remove that middle part, but then you're depriving the audience of actually seeing what were formative events and issues that Ellie contended with. And because she's obviously a main character and is still alive, this flashback episode carries much more weight than episode 3 did. And, you know, and representation issues aside and whatnot, this is an example of how organically you can have whatever story you want and have it be successful and meaningful to pushing the plot forward, which is what your work is supposed to do when it comes to you and it comes to your viewers in that serialized kind of format. You're not supposed to take detours and sidetracks into other characters that don't push the plot forward. You know, as Kingsley is going to mention here in his discussion points on the flashback setting, that might have worked. That particular episode 3, would have worked better in an anthology setting. I'm gonna let him talk about that for a quick minute here.
Yep. And yeah, you asked what made this one better. One, as you said, the character lived and you move forward. The part of episode 3, both characters died, so there was actually no point to it. 2, they could have died at any time and the same as results would have happened. And I was just thinking while you were talking that this has a huger, it's a better impact if you can actually see the story beats now. And it opened my eyes while you were talking. We were talking about, you know, the commander was telling us who Ellie was. We never saw it. She never took charge. She never did. She was a slacker at the time. She thought she lost her best friend, and she had nothing to fight for. And then she remembered her friend, and then you see that person actually start to come out because she made a conscious decision. She started, you know, planning ahead, making rational decisions of, I need to find this now. I need to find this. I'm going to come down. I'm going to save him because I let one person I love die in my arms. They probably spent the time together. My question on that is, why didn't she take her gun? But that's beside the point, off the subject. But we might see Ellie develop into what Quan saw in her to begin with. So we might not have saw it before, but we might see it after, and that would actually be kind of brilliant of writing, because it's the untapped potential. So now we're going to see if they could pull the trigger properly, because it looks like they pulled the trigger with the end of the flashback scene. But yeah, with flashback 1, episode 3, if they would have died by the Raiders, the battery would still been in the refrigerator for them to get there and build it. So them surviving that didn't mean anything. Other than seeing his really cool gas traps he had at the outside and watching living people burn. I mean, if you're into that. But another reason why it was better is that this actually moved the plot and gave you necessary backstory, unlike episode 3, which was unnecessary backstory. As we've said 100 times, if episode 3 was part of an anthology series, it would have made perfect sense. The world of The Last of Us. And then did episode 3. So you could find out who Bill and Frank was when they came upon the house and they read the letter. And then you can have that whole anthology season that answers that question. Having a whole episode of that cranky old couple from episode 6 at the beginning. Pretty awesome. A day in the life of in the city of Jackson. Or the building of Jackson. Like, how did Jackson go from a handful of people to hundreds of people living there? And like, what is everyone's role? How does their communist work? That is why episode 7 was a more superior flashback.
And thanks again, King Z, my man. So real quick, for Winterwolf's final thoughts on the week before I let King Z get into it. My final thoughts, and we were talking scores, when we tried shooting this on Monday. I'm going to give it a 3.5. I enjoyed the girls with their back and forth. I thought it was kind of cute at times when they were both kind of doing the awkward teen thing, and they didn't really know if the other one was into them. So they kind of had this series of like prodding advances and then retreats where, like, physical contact lingered a second too long for one and they'd pull away. Or somebody made a remark and it wasn't immediately responded to by the other one, so there was like an awkward silence. But I thought they did a really good job kind of escalating these little beats, these interactions, until they reach the pivotal moment. And of course, you get the first awkward teenage kiss, near the like the 2/3 mark of the episode there, and then that obviously gets resolved with tragedy. So it's kind of like you get a little bit of the good, and then you get a whole lot of bad. Then you watch them kind of work through with their very different personalities and acting, directed, narrative choices, how they resolve the crisis. So that was pretty good. I'll say again, in the original version of this, we gushed at length about just the mall and how it was lit, how they blended practical with CGI and other kind of camera effects that they use to give you the different lighting of the various places of the mall, which was kind of good. I really, really dug that pullback shot that King Z was talking about as they transitioned from the arcade into the toy store. That was just like, I like shots like that. It fuses me into what I'm watching. It makes me feel like I'm there, so it's kind of cool. Big nostalgia points with the 80s music and the Mortal Kombat 2. Like, the minute they were in the arcade and Ellie was lamenting that they didn't have any money to play the games and Riley gave her a bucket of quarters, they come walking around the corner and the theme music from Mortal Kombat 2 is bumping, and I'm like, oh, here we go. They picked a couple of my favorite characters. They picked Melina and Raiden. I don't know how they knew fatalities. More power to them. Maybe Riley had a guidebook laying around. It was just cool to see that in like a nostalgia kind of way. It was all right. And again, I think that the wrap up to the episode really hit well for me. We got to see Ellie evolve a little bit more. I'm talking about the tail end of that, the bookend to the flashback, where she's back present day. She's doing what she needs to do to save Joel, because she knows without Joel, she's boned. They're a partnership, if they're anything at all. They might not be friends yet. They might not be doing the found family thing yet, but they're at a very minimal, they're partners that have looked out for each other, have saved each other on several occasions apiece. So it was nice to see her kind of bite the bullet and take care of business for him. So I gave it a solid 3 out of 5. King Z had initially given it a 2 out of 5. But I'm going to let him give his final thoughts right here, and he'll explain why he went up to a 3.
All right, so my final thought on this episode is, after thinking about it, and that revelation I had while you were talking, when we were talking about comparing the two flashbacks, is that I'm actually going to bump it up from yesterday, because if that is actually what they were going for and they execute, which means I probably will lower this if they don't. And then I'll give my overall score later at the end when we do our live. Remember, comment down there if you want to see us go live after the season finale in 2 weeks. So I'm going to bump it up to 3, even it out with you, because I was at 2 yesterday after seeing it, because even though the show was masterfully done, great performances by 2 young adults who have a bright future ahead of them acting, and my flowers go out to the art department because it's a magnificent build. Magnificent. You did all the flowers you need, your props, and people should celebrate you guys. Yeah, I'm going to bump it up to 3 if they could pull off that story beat. Now, you were just talking about episode 6, and how I could see how they fix episode 6 is you were talking about, like, we never saw that change in Joel. It was they had the fight in the room, and then he was at the stables the next day and said, "You deserve a choice." Earlier in that episode, there was a key scene after he left Tommy and they had their fight, where he went out to, like, their Christmas tree, and he sees a girl, and it kind of looks like his daughter. And 20 years later, and then you see that his the girl that looks like her daughter has a daughter, and he would have been a grandfather. And it's like, this is what he was missing. Now, take that scene, make it night, have the bedroom scene with him and Ellie, and it's like, you're gonna go, and then he kind of leaves the house, and then have that scene where he sees her at the tree, and that whole scene. That could be his conflict of conscience, and then him show up. The other part was, why didn't he just say, "Hey, Tommy, grab the other horse, we're going together"? Because then it could have been a family thing. Because it was all about him finding his brother, wanted to try to be better at family, and it could have been a family thing. Joel, grab your horse, we're going to roll with this girl together, and then we'll be back, and I'm going to get you back for the birth of your child, type thing. I think that would have made episode 6 so much better for both Tommy, Joel, and Ellie, because it actually had character moments in that. But that's my take. What do I know? I'm sitting in my bedroom doing a podcast.
All right, guys, that was it for The Last of Us episode 7, titled Left Behind. You can catch HBO Max's Last of Us on Sunday nights at 9, episode 8 coming out right around the corner. Kingsley and I will be back on time now that we've got all of my boomer hard drive issues resolved. So we're hoping to get that up to you guys Tuesday afternoon like we typically do. One more little bit of housekeeping. Kingsley and I are thinking about trying a new show format to cover Mandalorian Season 3. We know we're going to be at least a week behind on that, but we're going to try out a couple of new things, a couple new gimmicks, have a little bit of fun with doing a couple other different things there. Kingsley also wanted me to remind you guys that he's going to be looking into launching an audio-only version of our show, probably also titled something like Winter Wolf's Den, title TBD. But we'll let you know when that's up and running, so you'll be able to look for us on all your favorite podcast providers, Spotify, iTunes, whatever else you kids are using these days. We'll find a way to put it there. And I think that's it on the housekeeping front. We hope you enjoyed. We're sorry for the shorter run this week. We do like our long conversations. We appreciate anybody that's stuck through. Comments, let us know what you thought of the episode. Was this a better flashback? Was it worse? Let us know what you thought about that overall. We hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, we are on the brink of hitting 100 subscribers. We'd love to get there by the end of the show. And the last thing to consider in commenting would be, please, we're considering doing a live stream at the end of this show. We go live directly after episode 9 with all the usual breakdown that we do. You get to see us do all of our stuff unedited, raw, and live for all of our buffooning and whatnot. So we'd love to know if anybody out there is interested in the live show, or if we should just plot along with the recorded content for the time being. But until then, you found the Winter Wolf's Den. I'm Winter Wolf. The other better looking guy is King Z. We're here on YouTube at Winter Wolf's Den, like I said, and you can follow me on Twitter for the time being at Winter Wolf's Den, and possibly an Instagram coming soon if I can get off my frozen wintry wolf butt. But until next time, guys, we appreciate you. We're sorry for the delay, and we'll see you guys in the next one.